At 7:41 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, Thursday, March 19th, 2026, the Iranian government sent a formal diplomatic note to 12 foreign ministries at the same time. Those capitals were Beijing, Tokyo, Brussels, New Delhi, Seoul, Ankara, Riyadh, Moscow, Islamabad, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, and Pretoria. The note was short, carefully phrased, and clearly intended to leak right away. Iran declared it would reopen the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping in 48 hours for every country that has not carried out unilateral military strikes against the Islamic Republic. Neither the State Department nor the Pentagon received any heads up. The White House found out about it the same way you're hearing it now, through the media. Iran has just signaled that 20% of global oil supply can resume moving while telling the United States to keep its hands off. This isn't a truce. This isn't a bargained settlement. This is Iran delivering the sharpest geopolitical countermove of the century so far. It has surgically restored access to the planet's single most vital energy artery for every major economy except one, while deliberately keeping American commercial traffic locked out. Tehran has transformed the Strait of Hormuz into a test of allegiance, and virtually the entire world is stepping forward to qualify. Every country except the one that carried out the original strikes. Right now, you're witnessing the total breakdown of the Trump administration's approach toward Iran. For weeks, Washington assumed that shutting the strait would generate overwhelming worldwide economic pain, forcing China, Europe, and the Gulf monarchies to rally behind America's military effort against Tehran. The logic seemed clean. Iran halts the oil, the globe points fingers at Iran, Iran buckles under crushing economic strain, and Trump emerges with what he could call his presidency's biggest foreign policy triumph. Every premise behind that plan has now crumbled. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down precisely what Iran declared this morning and explain why this targeted reopening inflicts far greater damage on Washington than the initial closure did. I'll lay out the quiet diplomatic channel linking Tehran and Beijing that enabled this move and show why China's role means the U.S. can't undo it without sparking another full-blown crisis. I'll detail the instant market response, proving that global investors have already decided who came out on top in this standoff. I'll clarify the implications for the postponed Trump-Xi summit and why Beijing now walks into any future talks with advantages Washington has no counter for. And I'll outline 3 plausible paths for the coming 72 hours as the White House races to come up with an answer it doesn't yet possess. If you've never subscribed here, hit that button immediately, because the level of clarity I'm about to bring isn't available anywhere else. Let's go through Iran's statement carefully, since the wording was deliberate. Every phrase was crafted to deepen Washington's embarrassment while delivering exactly the reassurance the rest of the planet required. Tehran's note avoided calling it a short-term suspension lift. Instead, it framed a lasting return of commercial transit rights for what it termed non-aggressor states. Per the text, a non-aggressor is any country that has neither launched military attacks on Iranian soil nor supplied substantial military aid for such attacks. That category fully rules out the United States. It fully rules out Israel. It embraces every other player, all European countries, every Asian economy, every Gulf nation that stayed out of direct strike participation, and the whole developing world. The note lists 5 practical elements. First, oil tankers flying the flag of any non-aggressor country can pass through the Strait of Hormuz starting in 48 hours following standard shipping protocols. Iranian Navy ships will accompany rather than block them. Second, marine insurers based in London, Hamburg, Tokyo, and Singapore, who halted Hormuz war risk policies when the blockade started, have now been officially told that Iranian forces will protect the physical security of non-aggressor ships, eliminating the chief obstacle to resuming coverage. Third, Iran pledges to issue 72-hour advanced navigational safety approvals to any non-aggressor ship operator that asks, building an administrative framework that turns selective entry into a standing toll-like arrangement instead of a conflict-era restriction. Fourth, the announcement explicitly names China, India, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union as preferred recipients of renewed oil deliveries. A clear indication that Iran isn't merely lifting the closure, but reshaping who gains from its authority over the choke point. Fifth, any effort by U.S. naval units to guide American-flagged or American-linked vessels through will be treated as a hostile act and met with proportionate military force. In plain terms, the U.S. can observe the oil moving again, but cannot participate in it. The result is no longer a shutdown, it's a checkpoint, and America is the only country lacking the pass to cross. Subscribe now and enable alerts, because next I'm revealing the behind-the-scenes diplomacy that made this possible, and why the Trump team was blindsided with no ready plan. Diplomatic insiders familiar with the Tehran-Beijing private line report that China's special representative arrived in the region shortly after the U.S.-Israeli strikes that killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Over 9 days of talks, the discussions went far beyond the humanitarian pause wording Washington kept pushing publicly. They mapped out an entire structure for the region's post-conflict balance. Beijing's central proposal to Tehran boiled down to this: China guarantees full recovery of Iran's oil export income within 90 days of any reopening, locks in purchases of Iranian oil at contractually elevated prices for the coming 3 years, and speeds up projects under the 25-year $400 billion China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. In return, Iran accepts a reopening that bars the United States, handing Beijing 2 major strategic wins. 1. China locks in reliable, inexpensive energy precisely when global oil is most volatile and costly. 2. China proves to every observer that it can fix a mess the U.S. started, positioning itself as the essential mediator in the world's most critical sea lane. That's proof point 1, the energy arithmetic. Pre-blockade, about 21 million barrels crossed the Strait of Hormuz daily, roughly 21% of worldwide oil use. While blocked, prices shot above $140 a barrel for the first time since 2008. China, importing around 11 million barrels daily with nearly half coming via Hormuz, faced roughly $350 million in extra daily energy expenses compared with pre-crisis levels. The targeted reopening wipes out that burden for Beijing instantly. For Washington, the math flips. U.S. energy firms tied to Gulf output, airlines with fuel hedges, manufacturers relying on petrochemical feedstocks, all keep paying 140-barrel economics while Chinese and European rivals snap back to cheaper supplies. That industrial handicap deepens week by week. The selective restriction stays active. Proof point 2, the insurance framework. Among the least covered yet most impactful aspects of the Hormuz standoff was Lloyd's of London and the global marine insurance sector. Once the blockade hit, Lloyd's froze all war risk policies for Hormuz passages. No war risk insurance meant shippers couldn't legally sail through, no matter what navies claimed about safety. Iran's statement tackled that exact issue for non-aggressor flags by supplying official navigational safety documents, which Lloyd's had quietly signaled would allow coverage restoration for non-U.S. ships. Within 90 minutes of the note going public, London industry contacts reported that urgent reviews were underway to restart policies for Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and European tankers. The physical channel reopens in 48 hours. The insurance world effectively reopened today. U.S.-flagged vessels stay uninsurable for Hormuz under Lloyd's present standards. Proof point 3, the market's ruling. In just 22 minutes after the Iranian note reached newswires, these shifts happened at once. Brent crude fell $18 to $40 a barrel in one session, the biggest daily drop since the 2020 COVID demand crash. Hong Kong-listed Chinese stocks jumped 3.2% on hopes of swift energy cost relief. European oil majors, Total, Shell, BP, gained 4 to 7% as Gulf routes reopened. U.S. energy firms reliant on Hormuz-linked chains saw declines. The dollar slipped simultaneously against the euro, yuan, yen, and won, a sign global money is betting against the dollar's home country strategically. Markets aren't pausing for pundit takes. Markets already declared the winner. Proof point 4, the diplomatic solitude indicator. When Washington kicked off its Iran operation, planners expected allies to close ranks behind the U.S., leaving Tehran isolated by the West. The Iranian note shows the reverse. None of the 12 recipients has criticized the selective reopening. France's foreign ministry welcomed restored freedom of navigation. Germany's industry groups described it as easing pressure on European supply lines. Japan said it was examining the statement with measured hope. South Korea's energy officials promptly started an urgent timeline review. China's foreign ministry noted that Beijing has always pushed dialogue and views the announcement as proof of its value. No allied capital labeled America's exclusion unfair, reckless, or dangerous. That quiet spoke volumes to Washington. Here's the scene inside the White House once the news broke. The NSC watch officer roused the National Security Advisor almost immediately. The initial question, is this real? Confirmation came through 3 separate intel streams. The Situation Room stood up and top NSC personnel were summoned back. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, fresh from Paris trade discussions with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng that wrapped days earlier, joined the secure call. Sources say Bessent quickly linked the Iranian move to the Beijing trade talks, observing that China's readiness to discuss tariffs in Paris likely aligned with foreknowledge of this announcement. Put differently, China negotiated trade optics in good faith across the table from Bessent, while withholding word that Iran was poised to deliver Beijing lasting leverage over U.S. foreign policy. When Trump got the briefing, 3 accounts called it heated. His opening question, can the Navy block Chinese and European tankers if U.S. ones are barred? Advisors explained that interfering would amount to war against allies and provoke instant economic counterstrikes from Europe and Asia together. Trump then asked about sanctioning firms that use the reopened strait. Lawyers replied that penalizing European, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean energy companies for legal international commerce would invite swift reciprocal sanctions from the EU, China, Japan, and South Korea, together 58% of world GDP. The White House later released a statement saying it was watching developments and would use every tool to safeguard American interests. It named no specific tools. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reached out to his French, German, Japanese, and South Korean counterparts. Every call either went unanswered or landed with lower-level staff. 4 allied foreign ministers dodging direct contact in one morning isn't random. It's deliberate. Here are 3 ways the next 72 hours could play out. Scenario 1, reluctant acceptance. The White House sees no workable military, economic, or diplomatic lever to undo the selective access without sparking widespread backlash, so it grudgingly accepts the facts on the ground while publicly spinning the reopening as an American victory. Officials claim U.S. military force compelled Iran to let global oil through, which was supposedly the objective all along. The narrative skips that U.S. ships stay barred, that China orchestrated the result, and that the already postponed Trump-Xi summit now proceeds with Beijing holding unmatchable cards. Scenario 2, the escalation snare. Refusing to swallow an obvious strategic loss, Trump directs the Navy to accompany American interest vessels through anyway, defying Tehran's terms. Iran strikes the escort group. The de-escalation trend reverses sharply. Oil prices rocket past $140 again. Europe and Asia, having just regained supply stability, face fresh interruptions and openly fault Washington for reigniting the crisis. China and Russia demand urgent UN Security Council meetings. NATO cohesion cracks as European members reject endorsing action that hurts their own energy needs. Trump gains short-term tactical clashes, but endures devastating strategic loneliness. Scenario 3, the turn toward Beijing. Acknowledging China facilitated the outcome and holds the initiative, the White House accelerates the Trump-Xi meeting, reframing it as crisis talks rather than a routine visit. Trump phones Xi personally to seek a bargain. China leverages its sway over Tehran to include American vessels in exchange for relief on Section 301 probes, tariff reductions, and tech export limits. Xi consents to preliminary discussions. The summit convenes in under 2 weeks. Beijing secures trade givebacks, relaxed technology restrictions, and public credit for mediating, all for an Iranian action taken at China's suggestion. The U.S. essentially pays strategically for a concession China grants as goodwill. I'm tracking 3 concrete signals over the next 72 hours. Will Lloyd's of London officially restore war risk coverage for Chinese and European tankers by Friday morning? That would cement the selective reopening as legally and commercially irreversible. Will the Trump administration quietly approach Beijing via unofficial channels to ask for Chinese help securing American vessel passage? Any such outreach signals Washington has internalized the shifted power dynamic and is seeking Beijing's assistance. And will any Republican senator openly demand a comprehensive congressional examination of the Iran military approach? When that happens, it marks the first internal coalition acknowledgement that the operation veered off course. Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz this morning for China, for Europe, for Japan, South Korea, India, and every country that never launched a missile. America remains outside the entrance. The plan was to apply overwhelming military force until Iran collapsed. Instead, Iran turned that same American force into a wedge that split the alliances underpinning U.S. strength. This isn't a minor setback. It's a historic strategic inversion, and the world watched it unfold live.